to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have former state senator Scott Howell and former Speaker of the House Greg Hughes. Gentlemen, great to have both of you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let's start off with the latest on abortion rights here in the state of Utah. For the second time, a judge putting a hold on the trigger law here in our state, granting a preliminary injunction. So that means it will stay in place until this goes up to the Utah Supreme Court. Greg, let's start with you. What do you make of the ruling?
I don't understand it. I think that the Supreme Court, our U.S. Supreme Court, was clear that this is a state's issue, that the state legislatures of every state are going to grapple with these issues and come with listening to constituents and coming up with laws framed around access to abortion. And that process has happened in our state. We had a trigger law in anticipation if Roe v. Wade were ever thrown out. And so I don't understand what there is left to discuss. I think that's going to be the debate or the process in every state. And every law that you have doesn't stay unchanged. I mean, there can certainly be amendments in a legislative session, but for the judiciary to step in, I don't understand their role at this time.
Okay, we'll get into potential amendments in just a minute, but first, Scott, let's turn to you. What do you make of the judge's ruling on this preliminary injunction?
Well, I think it was a wise decision on behalf of Judge Stone. I think he carefully studied the issue, and his exact words was it could do irreparable damage and harm to all the women who found themselves in this situation at this very short time. So I think he made a wise decision. I think it's one that the Supreme Court will now have the time to, the Utah Supreme Court will have the time to really evaluate it, and I think that this has to be methodical, and it has to be very thought out in such an important decision as when Roe was overturned. So I agree with him. I think he made a good decision.
I want to point out one thing. Utah's 18-week ban does remain in place, so currently that is the law of the state of Utah. Scott, I want to stick with you. If you take a look at this trigger law and potentially possible amendments down the road, where would you like to see that go? Well,
I think we have to take public safety out of the picture. I'm concerned about the teenage girl that had an encounter with Uncle Harry, and how does she have the courage to go to public safety and say, hey, this is one of my family members. I am concerned about rape and the consequences of the humiliation that goes through an investigation, coming into court and saying which man did that. I wish that piece of the law was not in there. I love that they put in what the faith, the LDS Church teaches about abortion in the case of rape, incest, health and life of the mother, and extreme fetal deformities, after careful consideration with your physician and ecclesiastical leaders. But it doesn't say anything about you have to go to public safety to get this. And I think that puts a big burden on public safety to go out and start investigating a rape to the degree that they have to, and the forensics that go in with that. I just don't think that's, I think we have enough challenges in making a very challenging decision about abortion.
Greg, do you see any room for amendments to the trigger law down the road?
Well, in terms of if a crime has been committed, I don't think that we should ever lament that those crimes need to be reported, as messy as it might be or as difficult as it might be. We cannot be okay with children being sexually abused. And if something like that has happened, there ought to be incentives or even requirements that we do everything we can to make sure that that doesn't happen and that justice is served. I don't see that as problematic. I think that's a pretty important provision. What I'd like to see in future laws are that it takes, as long as the rape and incest and life of the mother puts the decision tree solely at a woman's right and choice of whether to engage in intimacy or not. If a woman has been a victim of a crime, or her life is at stake and was not aware of it, those decisions have never been made. So I think that those are important provisions. What I'd like to see further are that men are financially and legally responsible for these pregnancies. That this isn't just a one person's, it took two, and it should take two to be dealing with this issue. Mm-hmm. And men should be financially and legally responsible for the care, either be adoption or whatever happen. There should be stronger laws, I think, making sure that men have that responsibility.
I completely agree with Greg on that issue, by the way, and both of us being former legislators, the legislature now has a responsibility to be much more sensitive to the needs of a child in daycare and all the things that are associated when you do have children. And I think Greg's point is really well taken about the responsibility of the other half of that 50% of creating a pregnancy. So I think that the legislature is really going to have to step up to the plate. They're going to have to invest some money. And traditionally, we haven't put a lot of money into those resources. But now I think it's probably time that we move forward, and the burden is going to be back on our former colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to move on to another topic. A recent poll, a couple of them actually, but I'm going to focus in on one from the New York Times, showing that President Biden's approval rating has now slipped to 33%. Greg, your thoughts on that?
Happiest man in the world right now is Jimmy Carter. He has finally passed the baton as the most incompetent president we've ever had, one-termer probably. When you see inflation, and numbers just came out this week showing a 40-year high, when you see gasoline prices over $5 a gallon, when you see a border that doesn't exist so that drug trafficking and human trafficking is happening, 56 people died in a truck that was illegally smuggled across, and they baked to death inside. They're a horrific crime that I don't see as much media attention as I think it deserves. There's just so much chaos right now. And I think those poll numbers reflect that. And I think that if you go back in time and look where poll numbers would look like this again, it was these kitchen table issues that are harming people. When you see inflation go up, understand that's a tax on every middle class, working, poor, everybody in America. That makes up most of America. They're seeing the impact, the detrimental impact of what's happening, and printing more money is not going to be the answer.
Scott, you have been a longtime supporter of the president. You were the contact here for his campaign here in the state of Utah. You were a guest of his at the White House over the 4th of July.
Wow.
One thing that these polls are showing is that even his own, the Democratic Party, are starting to sour on him.
Well, just to answer right from the very beginning, isn't it nice to wake up in the morning without a tweet to find out that we're going to bomb somebody in North Korea, or we're going to do this or that? And what a horrible time to be the President of the United States. Greg is right on all those things, the inflation and the price of gasoline. But one thing that is out of this equation is COVID and the supply chain and all the things that COVID has done to change the world. With President Biden, I think that his biggest challenge right now is helping the American people to understand that the price that you pay for gasoline is not anything that the government can do. It's what oil companies are doing. And heck yes, those oil companies, for a year and a half, when gas was down to almost $1.89 here in Utah, when there was demand came up and all of a sudden people started driving again, of course they're going to take advantage of it. We live in a capitalist society. I think on inflation, I think for that COVID, I blame it back, a lot of that back on that, is the supply chain was so low. They laid off workers. People left the industries. They weren't interested in working in that anymore. So what a terrible time to be the President of the United States.
Okay,
but there's one thing, just real
Mm-hmm.
quick, on that poll, the Democrats, the very, very far left Democrats, drove a lot of that poll in not supporting the president to even be more out of the centrist population.
Okay, that's a true point. But I've made this point as well. And Greg, I know you would argue a lot of what Scott just said, but yeah, we can sit here and argue this until we're blue in the face. But one thing is clear that you can argue, and that is, to both of you, that the American people do blame the president for this. Only 13% approve of the way he's handling the economy. The economy, always the main driver when it comes to an election. So Greg, how is this going to impact the midterms coming up?
The reason you're seeing that is you cannot fool the American people. You can't have a campaign when you run for president that says, I'm going to end oil and gas leases on federal land. Offshore drilling is going to be done. We're going to get rid of this extraction industry for the purpose of climate change or the threat of climate change. And when you see those issues roll out, when you cancel the Keystone Pipeline, when you get your oil or gas lease, but then you can't get the permit from the EPA to even drill, these are issues that we were energy independent as a country not long ago, and now we're begging countries like Iran, Dubai, we're asking the Middle East for oil. We are in a position now, and I think the American people are watching it, that's so starkly different than where we were not that long ago, that the idea that the that this is all the fault of either Russia or COVID, I don't think it rings true.
Okay,
Because I don't think it is true.
I only have about 20 seconds left, Scott, so I want to again ask you the question. That's how it's viewed by the American people. What impact will it have on the election?
It's going to have a major impact on the election. I think the redeeming factor might be Roe v. Wade or the Dobbs decision, where you might see more activist Republican women who have a big concern about that come out and vote, but it's dramatic.
Okay, gentlemen, I wish I had more time, but it goes by quick. I appreciate your insight.
You just go too fast. You need to make this a longer show.
Yeah,
really.
I'm voting for that.
Hey, maybe you guys could sponsor
We'd be
the next
happy
half
to.
hour. All right. Hey, appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.